Today on Locked On Red Wings, we bring in Andrew Rinaldi of Field Pass Hockey to recap the Grand Rapids Griffins season.
You're Locked On Red Wings, your daily podcast on the Detroit Red Wings. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, welcome back to the Locked On Red Wings podcast. We are your hosts, Brian Fisher and Scotty Bentley. Scotty also hosts over at Locked On Tigers. Want to thank you guys for making us your first listen every single day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. And today, Scotty, we have on a special guest. He is a writer for Field Pass Hockey. He is Andrew Rinaldi. And Andrew, how you doing today, man?
I'm doing great. How are you today, Brian?
I'm doing pretty good. I'm excited to talk some Grand Rapids Griffins. Scotty and I, as we talked a little bit before the show, Red Wings guys, we don't get a lot of opportunity to actually sit down and watch the Griffins players and how they're performing, which is why we wanted to bring someone like you on who sits there and gives news articles and updates and records podcasts about the Griffins. And the first question I think Scotty and I have is, how were they, man, this year? They up until the end of the season, they were in the playoff race, but they did finish last in the division, in a tight, close-knit division. What did you see from the Grand Rapids Griffins this season, and who exceeded your expectation, and who, was a little bit disappointing?
Yep. So you could kind of get the feeling early on in this season that, maybe this wasn't a team that was going to compete with like the Chicagos or Manitobas of the division up at the top, but this is certainly a team that had talent and was quite competitive all year long. And just at the tail end, they just had a number of different circumstances that a lot of teams in the AHL run into. Their leading point producer was called up for a month in Taro Hirose, and you see a lot of that coincided with a road trip going out to California to play two of the best teams in the league in Ontario and Bakersfield, for a team that didn't perform well on the road. It was a really rough stretch that they just couldn't get back from. They had their number one goalie in Calvin Pickard called up and then get hurt in Detroit. So that kind of left them, unfortunately, down another man. They lost their number one defenseman on that road trip in Ryan Murphy to an injury. So between, you're getting guys called up, you're getting guys hurt, you're in this tough situation on the road where you got to play some of these big teams. And in the end, they ran out of gas. Some of the other teams in the division kind of picked up the momentum. And, I think they finished lower than, I don't want to say they deserved, but circumstances kind of anchored them a little lower than maybe I think this team was capable of. I think they were definitely, especially in the expanded playoff format of the AHL this year, that this was a team that could have definitely made it. But, sometimes some things just don't really roll your way, and it is what it is. In terms of players that really kind of exceeded expectations or really impressed me. I mean, you got it. This season begins and ends with Jonatan Berggren. I mean, I feel like this is going to be a name that's going to be spoken a lot in this episode. But I mean, from opening night against Rockford, this kid, you could just tell, had the skill set for the NHL. And for him, it was a little rocky kind of opening up, which is to be expected. You got this 21-year-old, he's now 22, coming over from Sweden, used to the larger ice, more time to make decisions with the puck, little tighter checking, obviously, over here in North America. But with a guy like that, his game just got better and better as the year gone on. And at the end was kind of just pulling this roster to try and make the playoffs as best as he could. I mean, over the last 12 games, he had something like 18 points, I want to say, and was just he made a play every time he touched the puck. It was amazing. And not only was just his work with the puck, his vision, I mean, obviously, playmaking first and foremost, but when he releases it, he's got an incredible shot. But he added that extra element in this game of that physicality that he could go to the boards and get the puck out of a scrum, or he went to the net and pick up those rebounds, and is just seeing him grow. And that is what's going to help at the next level in the NHL, where you're going to have even less time and less space, and everything happens so much faster on a dime. So I was really happy watching Jonatan. I mean, in post-game interviews, he's just a great guy, and it's going to be, I mean, obviously one of the number one prospects for this Red Wing team to look out for. But on top of that, I was also really impressed with Jared McIsaac, another young guy. Kind of is really worried. So I went up to Traverse City for the prospects tournament this September, and the first game I saw him, I mean, he takes this nasty hit from behind and has to be stretchered off the ice, and just your heart sinks for a guy like this with the shoulder surgeries he's been dealing with, and all the hype behind this second round pick in his draft, and he can't catch a break. But he's in there for opening night. He maintains his development all season long, used in all situations: power play, penalty kill, even strength, offensive zone starts, defensive zone starts. Just a really dependable guy for the Griffins there on that back end, which is what we wanted to see and what we were hoping to see. And it was just a matter of staying on the ice for him. And this season, he was mostly healthy for the most part, and it just makes it feel good at the end of the day, to see a guy just finally get on the ice there. And another one who might not get as much attention was the goalie Victor Brattstrom.
Yeah, that's a good one. Because I know that
sure.
he was kind of forced into a role where he wasn't necessarily getting a lot of minutes after the Calvin Pickard injury. And right there, I think it was right after they called Calvin Pickard up, he got a shutout. But after that, it seemed like he wasn't, just by me here looking at the goal, box score, wasn't making as many saves as you would expect, which is why a lot of people speculated when they signed Magnus Hellberg he was actually going to get sent down to Grand Rapids, which never happened. So with Victor Brattstrom, did you see any step forward from him this season?
Absolutely. I mean, the opening couple months of the season, or at least in October and early November, I mean, just really, really struggled. And you saw Pickard make 12 straight starts at one point, I want to say. So you could tell that head coach Ben Simon was kind of not, I don't want to say, skeptical to start him, but when you got a rock like Pickard, you got to ride the horse sometimes. And they sent Brattstrom down to Toledo to kind of, focus on his game, get his confidence back. And by season's end, you were watching this young kid, he'd get the first start of the game and he's out there doing cartwheels at center ice. So just on confidence alone, I mean, it was a marked difference from, October to, here in April. I think that, and just in talking with him, he's the kind of guy who he wanted more starts and he wanted to take that number one job over. And, I think it kind of having Pickard kind of battle with him there really pushed him to work on his game and to, he, for as much as he struggled at the beginning of the year, he didn't quite get so rattled as the season went on, especially when he was kind of like, okay, you're the guy now. And, he didn't really have a choice at that point. It was just his net with picks up in Detroit. So, if you're talking long term, I don't know if this guy is really ever going to make the Red Wings. I mean, you're looking at them signing Hellberg, you got Kosa waiting in the wings and everything. But just at, at this level here in Grand Rapids, seeing him rebound from, I mean, I don't want to rag on the guy or anything, but it was a pretty bad start to the season. I mean, he wasn't covering his angles. He was you can tell, just shaky and not comfortable. So to go from that to being kind of the rock that they had to lean on, they really didn't have a choice going down the stretch, but at least he gave them a chance to win every night. Now, whether Grand Rapids kind of helped them out or not is another story, but
Well, and again, the Grand Rapids Griffins weren't really necessarily helped either by the fact that the Red Wings called up a bunch of their players. I mean, you look at the Red Wings roster, like literally right now, right today. I mean, you got Taro Hirose, Turner Elson, one of the alternate captains, Kyle Crisculo, all those guys on the Red Wings roster who were mainstays on the Griffins. So I wouldn't necessarily. I mean, yeah, the Griffins probably didn't play their best hockey, but they were also, and every AHL team deals with this, but the Griffins, it feels like maybe a little bit more so than other NHL teams, especially in a team that's a lottery team like the Red Wings, probably had to deal with more of their AHL talent getting called up than other teams. And I do also want to talk about that too, is, how badly did it hurt? But first, I do got to talk to you guys today about Shady Rays. Shady Rays is an independent sunglasses company that gives you the features of $200 sunglasses for a fraction of the price. That means polarized lenses, well-constructed durable frames, and premium high-end finishes. Also, something you won't find anywhere else is Shady Rays' insane protection program. Shady Rays includes lost and broken protection on every pair. They will send you a brand new pair if you lose them, no matter what happened. Give them a try, and if you don't love them, you'll pay nothing. It's as simple as that. Plus, 10 meals are donated to fight hunger in America when you shop with Shady Rays. Exclusively for our listeners, head to shadyrays.com and use code LOCKEDON to get 50% off 2 or more pairs of polarized sunglasses. That's code LOCKEDON. The best deal of the season, 50% off 2 or more pairs of Shady Rays sunglasses. Backed by over 150,000 verified 5-star reviews. Segment 2, Locked On Red Wings podcast. We are joined by Andrew Rinaldi of Field Pass Hockey. He's given us a little bit of a recap of the Griffins season, what went wrong, what went well. And before we go back to my question, Scotty, I don't even know if you said a word yet.
You know what's crazy? I was literally going to start when I asked my question. I was going to say, I think this is the first time I've spoken so far in this episode. I have like you should ask your question first, because I have I'm going to give them a platform and just let them ride. So you should ask your question first.
That's fair. So my question kind of goes back to something you touched on in the first segment about the amount of players that got called up and how that really hurt them. The question being is, with the amount of players that called up to the NHL level throughout the season due to injuries and players who can't play in Canada, stuff like that, do you think that the Griffins did deal with more of that than your standard NHL team? And if so, did that have a detrimental impact on their ability, let's say, to make the playoffs?
This year was very unique. I think when we run through, wind the clock back to January, right? And a lot of teams are dealing with a lot of the COVID protocols. And so I also cover the Chicago Wolves, and there was at one point their entire first line was up in Carolina playing there, and they had 2 more forwards, and like that. So I kind of think back to that, and the Wolves, they found a way.
Yep.
Every other team in this league is kind of dealing with the same kind of issues. I think that Grand Rapids just didn't really have the personnel to kind of fill in for those couple of games. So when, you lose a guy like Taro Hirose for a whole month down, the stretch for the playoffs, that's going to hurt. But they do have guys who, like Turner Elson, Dominic Shine really turned in an offensive year this year. Tyler Spezia also had a career year. They had guys who could step up, but it was just not enough, So I do think that they kind of got, they had their call-ups, but I think those top line guys were worth a little more because the depth really in this team just really wasn't there to kind of keep them afloat. And we saw that, when Crisco and Hirose were up in Detroit. I mean, this team, It was Jonatan Berggren and Riley Barber scoring, or no one scored.
And then Riley Barber would get called up.
Exactly. So it's Jonatan scoring or no one scores. It's really tough, and especially, I mean, Hiroshi's call up coincided with Ryan Murphy, their power play quarterback, getting hurt for the rest of the year. So it just they couldn't catch a break. They didn't really have the depth to kind of fill in. And, when you have all these factors kind of rolled into one, I guess, I mean, when you have a tight division like the Central, that's how you end up finishing last.
Yeah.
So my first question of the show halfway through, we are, I'm very happy about it, by the way. You are now hosting your own award show. Okay.
Okay.
You have all the rules are your own.
All right.
Team MVP for the Griffins, and if it's Berggren, then you're not allowed to pick him.
I would actually kind of go a little off the beaten path here, and I would go with Dominic Shine. And even though he's not he's not a big name prospect, a lot of Red Wing fans would be familiar with, this is the kind of guy that you need in the AHL to stick up for, if some meathead from Iowa is going after Berggren, you don't want him dropping gloves and going after it. You want a guy like Shine. And my favorite quote of the season was when I was asking Coach Simon about Shine's game, and he said that he would share a foxhole with Dominic Shine any day of the year. And I think that kind of speaks volumes when you kind of get to know Coach Simon and you watch a guy like Shiner's game. There was an important game on that road trip in California where Spezia took a bad high hit and Shine, kind of dropped the gloves on the guy. And it got to the point where in the AHL, I believe your third instigator penalty, you automatic game suspension. And I asked Coach about it, and I was like, do you think you would have rather had Shine's gloves stay on in that kind of situation? I mean, you're in the playoff race. He was on a hot streak offensively, and he was like, nope, I stand behind anything that Shiner does. And, I think that really speaks to this guy just gave his heart on every shift. He might not have been the most talented player, but he was a guy that at least the Griffins could depend on. And again, he's one of those guys who could play any situation. He made some power play time, a lot of shorthanded time, and was a real just warrior for this team. I would probably, I love those muckers and grinders, so I would probably
me too. Yeah, I love that answer.
So and especially if we're taking Berggren off the ballot, then yeah, right. It's Shiner for sure.
So I want to know your thoughts on, obviously you gave us a little bit on Jonatan Berggren there in the first segment. Donovan Sebrango is another guy who a lot of Red Wings fans are looking closely at, and taken in the third round, number 63 overall in the 2020 draft. He did get to play 2 games in the World Juniors with Canada, and he had 1 goal in two games before, World Juniors pandemic just wiped it out. In the season with the Griffins, however, he had 7 points in 63 games played. Is that about par for the course for a guy in his first professional season, or were you expecting a little bit more out of him? Second professional season, sorry. He played last year.
He kind of, with COVID last year, I remember it was a big story that, he wasn't able to play in juniors, so he was able to get some time up there in the Griffins being underage, which was great. And I think because of, this wasn't necessarily his first rodeo here in Grand Rapids, I think I was expecting a little bit more offense, especially once, like I said, with the Ryan Murphy injury, that he might, it might have been that guy who should have gotten more of those opportunities and had done something with them. But I think in his own end is where his game really shines. And I don't want to say he disappointed offensively. I think I expected more, but I don't think he necessarily had a bad season by any means. I think he's still a very young player who's kind of learning to utilize these very raw tools that he has. And, like I said, when you have a guy like McIsaac, or you bring in AHL vet like Dan Renouf, I think those are going to be the guys that are going to be leaned on towards the end, and it's tough to bear that responsibility of being the guy when you're 20 years old.
Yeah.
So,
well, that's important to know too. Is like he did just play for U20 Team Canada, so
Yeah.
while his you said that obviously as a defenseman, he was playing well on his own end. So point production, especially with defensemen, is not really where you need to just look. But it is very encouraging to hear from somebody like yourself who watches the games that, he took a pretty good step forward in his development, and maybe there's still more room to grow, but that's because he's incredibly young. He's still very raw. So some players just develop on a different timeline. I mean, Jared McIsaac, who you talked about again in the first segment, he's 22 now, and it finally seems like he's taken a real step forward in his development, being healthy for the majority of the season. And I mean, some players just develop on different timelines.
Yeah, and when you're a guy like McIsaac, just being on the ice at all is
it's a step forward.
Exactly.
Do got to talk to you guys today about BetOnline.net. BetOnline.net is your number one source for all your betting stats and sports info. Find all the latest sports developments, league reviews, and news, including this year's basketball playoffs and the start of the Major League Baseball season. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sports wagering information, from live betting to playoffs, esports, and more. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and action. BetOnline.
BetOnline.
Where the game starts. Segment 3, Locked On Red Wings podcast. Again, we are joined by Andrew Rinaldi of Field Past Hockey. He covers the Grand Rapids Griffins. We're picking his brain about how that Griffins season went. Before I go to my next question, Scotty, you got one?
I'm ready to go to Berggren. So
I'm ready
specifically, so unless you have anything else on anybody else, then
my next question was Berggren. So
okay, so was mine. So
go ahead, Scotty.
I mean, I just want to know, watching him throughout the season. You kind of mentioned in the first segment how, as the season went on, he got more and more confident and everything. I mean, by the end of the year, do you think that he was NHL ready? I guess is my biggest question. I know I'm putting you between a rock and a hard place, but
I like it. I mean, I've seen, I'm glad I have a good frame of reference over in Chicago and seeing Chicago's the cream of the crop. I mean, it is what it is. I'll just say it. It sucks. Your division rival, they're the gold standard, but it is. And I look at a couple players like Jack Drury, who I think would be an NHL player if it just, not for the roster in front of him being a cup contender and everything. But for Berggren, I think as it gone on, I think I would like, even though I think he developed a lot physically, getting, I said, into the corners in front of the net, you might want to see a bit of a touch of that. I know it's an interesting dynamic because you want to see him kind of battle a little more, but at the same time, he's not going to be your muck and grind type of forward. This is a guy who thrives in space, and he knows exactly where the puck's got to go when it's got to be there. I mean, it's kind of magical to watch, but I do think that in the right situation, I think he could have earned a couple of game looks here at the end. I know that they kind of want to reward your guys like Riley Barber and Turner Ellison. Like, hey, you've been in Grand Rapids all these years. We're going to kind of, toss you a bone and have a couple games up here in Detroit and help you out. I think that could have easily been Berggren. I think he could have been a guy who, you plug in for a couple of games, at least see where he's at and how he fares with the speed. I mean, every guy I've talked to who's been up in the NHL and then has come back, it's just the speed and the way things happen up in the NHL is a world ahead of this league still. And I mean, that's just, it's a developmental league. That's what it's here for. So I would have loved to have seen him. I think he totally could have done it. Is he ready to be a full-time NHLer at, the end of March? Probably not. But, I mean, he's still got a whole offseason to work, to maybe add a couple pounds, and then come in the training camp. And, I mean, he puts in a good camp. I think this guy is 100% going to be on the roster next year.
Well, and that leads me to the follow-up. If he's not quite to that point yet? Like, what does he got to do? And you kind of hinted at it there in your final sentence, but what does he got to do to really make himself a no-doubter for the NHL roster next season?
Yeah, I think just maybe about like 5-10 pounds of muscle, just a little bit, to add to that frame. But again, you want talk about how these are young kids growing up. He just turned 22 years old. I think just kind of, it's all about kind of routine, learning these minor little habits of coming to the rink every single day, and you never take a shift off. And I don't think consistency was ever his issue, but I mean, we've seen over the last month, I mean, this guy has just been a workhorse for this team, especially when he's like, okay, you're the guy. He's taken that role and he's really run with it. I mean, I don't want to sound like I'm pumping this guy's tires, but I'm kind of pumping his tires. I mean, he really impressed me over the last month with how his game evolved and how he's just taken that next step. It's really not easy to do in your first season over in North America. You got these guys that have been playing in the A for years and years and years and still haven't been able to kind of crack through that ceiling yet. So I think he can. I know Coach Simon wants him to be a little grittier, a little greasier, and you want to see that. And then you kind of also got to understand that's not really his game. And I don't think that it's necessarily a bad thing that he's not always going to be there in the corners to fish those pucks out. I think that he's got to kind of be utilized in the right situations, in the right scenarios. That's not his skill set. He's not a grinder. It is what it is. But I think, in situationally, he can step up there and win a puck battle on the boards, which is something that you couldn't say about him back in November. And these are just the things that, you got to work on day in, day out, these little details. And I mean, you look his work in the neutral zone, his work defensively. He's had time on the penalty kill to work on these areas of his game. And it's at this point, it's just kind of more just impressing the coaching staff in Detroit and playing to a level where you got to force them to keep you on. And I think he's certainly done that in Grand Rapids. And, I guess we'll just have to revisit this in September.
Yeah.
Do you think, sorry, Brian, do you think that that was also his biggest step forward this year too? Like it's the physicality is the thing that he needs to keep improving on, but that is like the answer to both questions. Like, do you think that that's also the biggest step he took at the same time?
Yeah. Like I said, this guy, I mean, you could tell day one that he had the skill to do it, but there's a lot of guys that have the skill that might not have the drive, the work ethic, at this level, everyone's skilled, but it's right. Like I said, it's that commitment to those little details that really elevate your game and push you forward. In Chicago, again, that kind of, mirroring it, I watched a first round pick in 2018 get healthy scratched for guys who are career AHLers because he wasn't willing to do the dirty work, do the little things. And now he's exiled off to Germany to finish off his contract. And you never would have expected a guy like him to be in his position. But that's like I said, when everyone's skilled, you got to find a way to rise above the cream. Awful metaphor, but you kind of get what I'm getting.
Yeah.
The cream of the crop. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
That's kind of what I was thinking of.
Combining two analogies there.
Two analogies.
I was like, right
there.
You should listen to some of Scotty and I's episodes where we're just like, what am I even trying to say right now? Like, what are the words that are coming out of my mouth?
Yeah,
we
just let analogies flow. Yeah.
But I think especially for coming over from Sweden, where it's not as physical of a game, and then getting attuned to that North American style, and not just getting tuned into it, but again, as we saw in the last month, really thriving with it and continuing to produce, continuing to impress. I think, he met those challenges, and I think he's overcome them for sure.
Who do you expect of the Red Wings prospects that are not with the Griffins to be with the Griffins next season?
I would love to see Omer Soderblom here.
That's a good one.
We keep seeing, all the little clips on Twitter and everything of just this monster behemoth. And it all depends on how, ready we feel that they are for this North American ice. Kind of like Berggren, you know the skill set, but if they're not ready for that extra step up in physicality, well, then, and it's not to say that the SHL is, any kind of step down from the AHL or anything. It's just a different style. I mean, these
bigger
are
ice too.
Guys. Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
absolutely. And it's a different game. It is what it is. But I'd love to see William Wallander here as well. That would be fantastic. And I think that just that those a couple of those the breath of fresh air, because right now it seems like you got Berggren as tier 1 far and away. Then you got McIsaac, you got Sebrango, you have Seth Barton, who's another 3rd round pick, another really interesting one who again was hurt the first half of the year. Then he spent some time down in Toledo, and then kind of getting his legs under him as this team's going through a playoff race. He had his flashes of good plays and his flashes of not so good plays. And I think having a full season of him around, and it would make just a couple of these guys coming over from Sweden would make this just such a much more, I don't want to say interesting, but certainly from a future Red Wings perspective, I feel like the actual farm teams over there in Frölunda, and then we're kind of
No, for real, yeah.
So.
Well, and I think too, in my personal opinion, that if Simon Edvinsson doesn't make the NHL roster at camp, he'll be with Grand Rapids. I think that he's played after the year he had over in Sweden, that he doesn't have much left to prove.
There's nothing left to prove over there.
I think you go to Grand Rapids next if you're not ready for the NHL level.
Right. He's either going to skip it or he's going to start there.
Yeah. I don't think they send him back to Sweden because they're going to probably want to have him on tap ready to go.
Yeah, they also just got him on the entry level deal and everything.
Right.
Elmer Soderblom's right around the corner on that. Like they're saying that he's next on the entry level contract. So I think you're going to get a couple of those Swedes over there in Grand Rapids, and next year those Griffins are going to be on a pure skill level. Going to be really, really exciting.
Yeah, I'm excited for it. I'd probably faint if I heard that Edvinsson was getting a couple games stint down here and
just to sell the jerseys, just to get him in a Griffins jersey to sell him. Like that's it.
Yeah, right. I mean, we were all I think we're kind of just expecting another cider where a guy comes in and just blows the door down. So you kind of got to, I don't want to say temper your expectations a bit, because this kid is just, we've seen what he can do and he's insanely talented. But you got to remember that Sider spent some time down here in Grand Rapids as well. I mean, you got to like really think about it, because that was, pre-COVID, which feels like, BC at this point. But when you think about it, Sider learned a lot about how this game was played over here. Then COVID happened. He dominated the Swedish league before he finally became a full-time Red Wing. But maybe Simon's going to have to follow the same thing. And again, I would love it. I don't, not necessarily sure if that's exactly what's going to happen. I mean, I know we're going to have some roster or some holes in the roster to fill up here. So this is a long off season. I know we're kind of, just getting to the beginning of it here for the Wings and for the Griffins, but there's a lot of time, these guys grow a lot. They're going to be hitting the gym constantly, and Simon might come in and Steve might say he's ready, he's good to go, we're going to keep him. It'd break my heart, but again, if I can get a little bit of Soderblom and Wallander, I think I'll be okay.
Andrew, it was an absolute pleasure.
I have one more question.
Oh, go ahead, Scotty.
Andrew, I'm going to tell you a riddle.
Oh man, here we go. All right, this is amazing.
I just saw Batman, so I'm a little worried here, but go ahead.
And if you know the answer, you can stop me at any point. Okay.
All right.
A person rides into town on a horse on Friday. 2 days later, he rides out of town
Still, it's on Friday. How is that possible?
I gotta say I'm stumped.
That
But
does
that
not
means
help
that
my narrative.
That does not help your narrative. Okay,
It
so
does
Scotty and I,
not.
Scotty and I
horse's
have
name
an
was Friday.
argument. The horse's
Okay.
name was Friday, which is
So,
why 2 days
this
later you're
is
still
an
on Friday.
ongoing-
No, it's on
thing.
the horse. Yeah. Okay.
That-
yeah.
that
I've heard this one.
Brian and I have been debating for
Since I
he
took over.
joined the show, like very early on, probably like 7-8 months now. I made a passing comment about like, oh, the horse's name was Friday because I thought everyone knew the riddle and like it was a like big part of like all my friends knew it. Like I was like I thought everybody knew it, and Brian was like I have no idea what that is. So now
I was like,
every
what?
single guest we have on, we ask if they know the riddle or not.
And so far, only one guest.
That's literally
No.
not true. He just says one every time.
Well, it goes up to like 9 or 10.
No,
No, so
it's well more than
Armando
one.
of
He
Locked
just
On
says
Panthers
one
knew
every
it.
time.
Locked On Panthers knew. Who else knew it?
Once you
Rangers,
started going through, I was
Panthers.
like, oh man, of course I knew.
See, There you go.
I've heard it before, but I had to really like wind through some of the dust and the cobwebs in the back of my mind.
So you've heard it before.
No, I don't
Interesting.
count it. I do not count
Interesting.
it.
I
So
gave
he's
up.
heard it before, Brian. You hear that?
Uh-huh.
no.
Yeah, Scotty. Okay. Andrew, it was absolutely fantastic having you on. You gave us a good perspective on the Griffins season. Where can people read your stuff, follow you,
Yeah,
listen to your
plug
stuff,
everything you
plug
do.
everything you want?
Any
For
content
sure.
you make.
Yeah, all right. Well, you guys mentioned, but I write for fieldpasshockey.com. You can find my Griffins and Chicago Wolves content if anyone's interested in what's going to be going on with the AHL playoffs this year, because Grand Rapids they're going to be watching from the outside, but
They're going to be golfing.
yeah, no, I mean, beautiful golf courses out in Western Michigan, that's for sure. But you can also follow me on Twitter. My handle is at FPH Griffins, or again with the Wolves at FPH Wolves. I love live tweeting during the games. I love interacting with fans, and just if you couldn't tell, I just love talking about hockey. So you'll find my articles, my live tweets, I'll meme it up every now and then. I try and give the people what they want. So you can find me there.
So do we.
All right, Scotty, you and I will be back on Friday for a new episode as we preview the New Jersey Devils game, the final game of the season for the Detroit Red Wings.
Last game.
And that'll be it for the week. We'll be back on Monday after that. So same time, same place. It's your team every day.
Every day.